The invitation contained only 6 words, but it changed my family forever. That was the thought running through my mind as I stared at the small cream-colored envelope sitting on my kitchen table. My name is Rachel Bennett, and until that moment, I believed I knew almost everything about my family. I was wrong. The envelope had arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. There was no return address, no explanation, only my mother's familiar handwriting on the front. Inside was a single card containing one short message. Please come alone this Saturday. Love, Mom. That was all. No details. No reason. No indication why she had chosen to send a formal invitation instead of simply calling me. My mother, Eleanor Bennett, was 69 years old and had always been a practical woman. She disliked drama. She disliked unnecessary surprises. Most of all, she disliked wasting words. Yet something about this felt different. I called her immediately. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again later that evening with the same result. By Thursday, I began to worry. My older brother Michael had received the same invitation. So had my sister Caroline. Neither of them knew any more than I did. We exchanged messages trying to guess what was happening. At first, we assumed it was about our mother's health. That seemed like the obvious explanation. But when Michael offered to drive her to a doctor's appointment before the meeting, she politely declined and insisted everything was fine. Her response only deepened the mystery. Saturday arrived with gray skies and cool autumn air. I drove the 40 miles to my mother's house feeling more anxious with every mile. The Bennett family home sat on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees that had already begun turning shades of gold and red. It was the same house where my siblings and I had grown up. The same house where every Thanksgiving dinner, birthday celebration, and Christmas morning had taken place. Yet as I pulled into the driveway, the familiar place felt strangely unfamiliar. Several cars were already parked outside. My brother had arrived. So had my sister. A few other relatives stood near the front porch speaking, quietly among themselves. Everyone seemed confused. Everyone seemed uneasy. Inside, the atmosphere felt even stranger. My mother greeted each guest warmly, but offered no explanation. She smiled. She asked about our lives. She poured coffee. Yet behind her calm expression, I sensed something else. Determination. Purpose. It was as though she had already made a decision that nobody else knew about. The living room had been rearranged since my last visit. Chairs formed a semicircle facing the fireplace. A large wooden table stood near the front window. On top of it rested several sealed boxes and what appeared to be old documents. I noticed Michael staring at them too. Any idea what this is about? He whispered. I shook my head. None. More relatives arrived throughout the afternoon. Cousins, an aunt, even a family friend who had known my mother for decades. By 4 o'clock, nearly everyone had gathered. Yet one detail immediately caught my attention. In the center of the room sat an empty chair. Unlike the others, it faced the entire group. Nobody sat in it. Nobody moved it. It remained there like a silent question waiting for an answer. Finally, my mother stepped forward and asked everyone to take their seats. Conversations faded. The room became silent. She looked at each of us carefully before speaking. Then her eyes settled on the empty chair. For a moment, her expression softened with emotion. When she finally spoke, her first sentence sent a chill through the room. Before this day is over, she said quietly, 3 secrets that have been hidden for years will finally be revealed. For several seconds after my mother spoke, nobody in the room moved. The silence felt heavy, almost deliberate, as if everyone was waiting for someone else to react first. I glanced around the living room and saw the same confusion reflected on every face. My brother Michael leaned forward in his chair. My sister Caroline folded her arms tightly across her chest. Even our Aunt Linda, who normally had something to say about everything, remained unusually quiet. My mother stood beside the fireplace with her hands gently folded in front of her. She looked calm, not nervous, not emotional, calm. That alone unsettled me. Eleanor Bennett had always been honest, but she was not dramatic. If she had gathered nearly the entire family together to reveal 3 secrets, then whatever was coming had a matter. Mom, Michael finally said, breaking the silence. What exactly is going on? A few heads nodded immediately. My mother smiled faintly. You will understand soon enough. That answer satisfied no one. She walked slowly toward the wooden table near the window and placed her hand on one of the sealed boxes. Then she looked at the empty chair positioned in the center of the room. Once again, her expression softened. I noticed it this time. There was sadness there. Affection too. It was the look someone gives when remembering a person they miss deeply. Before we begin, she said, I want everyone to understand something. These secrets are not being shared to hurt anyone. They are being shared because the truth deserves a chance to breathe. Nobody spoke. The room remained completely still. Then my mother opened the first box. Inside were dozens of photographs bundled together with faded ribbons. She carefully removed a stack and carried them to the coffee table. Family members leaned forward, trying to see what they contained. At first glance, they appeared ordinary. Old family pictures, birthday parties, holiday gatherings, summer vacations. Yet my mother's attention remained fixed on one particular photograph. She held it in her hands for several moments before showing it to the room. The picture had been taken more than 20 years earlier. It showed our family standing together in front of the house during a 4th of July celebration. My father was smiling. My brother and sister were teenagers. I looked barely old enough to drive. Nothing about the photograph seemed unusual. Do any of you remember this day? My mother asked. Several people nodded. Michael smiled slightly. Dad burned the hamburgers. A few relatives laughed. Even I remembered that. My father had spent the entire afternoon insisting he could handle the grill by himself. The memory felt warm and harmless. Yet my mother did not laugh. Instead, she pointed toward a section of the photograph near the edge of the frame. Look carefully. We did. At first, I saw nothing. Then something caught my attention. There was another person standing partially hidden behind a tree in the background. Someone none of us had ever noticed before. The figure was blurry, almost impossible to identify. But once seen, it was impossible to ignore. Confused murmurs spread through the room. Who was that? Caroline asked. My mother slowly set the photograph down. That question, she replied quietly, is connected to the first secret. Every conversation stopped instantly. My heartbeat quickened. Whatever mystery had brought us together clearly reached further back than any of us imagined. My mother opened a folder beside the photographs and removed several old letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The paper looked yellow with age. The handwriting appeared unfamiliar. She held them carefully, almost reverently. Then she looked directly at me. For a brief moment, something passed through her expression that I could not understand. Regret, concern, maybe both. Finally, she took a deep breath and spoke words that sent a chill through the room. The person standing in that photograph is the reason this family gathering exists today. And before this evening is over, every one of you will know exactly who they were. The room seemed to shrink around us after my mother's last sentence. Nobody looked away from the photograph. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Every eye remained fixed on the blurry figure standing near the tree in the background. My mother carefully untied the faded blue ribbon around the letters and selected the oldest one. The paper looked fragile, as though it had survived decades hidden away in a drawer. This letter was written 23 years ago, she said quietly. And until recently, I believed it would stay hidden forever. Michael leaned forward. Who wrote it? My mother looked down at the page before answering. A woman named Claire Morgan. The name meant nothing to me. Judging by the expressions around the room, it meant nothing to anyone else either. My mother nodded toward the empty chair in the center of the room. Everything begins there. The statement only deepened the mystery. Then she started reading. The letter was polite and heartfelt. Claire thanked my mother for meeting with her and expressed gratitude for a kindness that had changed her life. At first, the contents seemed ordinary. Then the details became stranger. Claire repeatedly mentioned someone she called the Promise. She thanked my mother for protecting it. She thanked her for keeping her word. Most confusing of all, she referred to our family several times despite apparently having no official connection to us. By the time my mother finished reading, nobody understood what was happening. Who was she? Caroline finally asked. My mother remained silent for a moment. Then she picked up another photograph from the box. This one was newer, perhaps 15 years old. Again, a familiar family gathering filled most of the image. Again, hidden near the edge stood the same woman. Older now, still distant from the group, still almost unnoticed. A chill ran through me. She attended family events? I asked. My mother nodded. Several of them. Confused murmurs spread throughout the room. How could someone appear in family photographs for years without anyone remembering her? My mother seemed to anticipate the question. Most people only notice what they expect to see, she said. Claire was never introduced because she never wanted attention. She opened another envelope and removed several documents. One appeared to be a hospital record. Another looked like a handwritten note. Then she revealed a photograph of herself standing beside Claire. The picture had clearly been taken years earlier. Both women looked younger. Both were smiling. The room fell completely silent. "You knew her well?" Michael said. It was not a question. "Yes," my mother replied. "Very well." She walked slowly toward the empty chair and rested her hand on its back. Her eyes glistened slightly under the afternoon light streaming through the window. For the first time since the gathering began, she looked genuinely emotional. "Claire was part of this family's story," she said softly. "Far more than any of you realize." I felt my heartbeat quicken. Every answer seemed to create 3 new questions. Why had this woman remained hidden? Why was my mother revealing her existence now? And why did the empty chair seem connected to everything? Then my mother opened a smaller envelope tucked inside the box. Unlike the others, this one contained a single folded page. She unfolded it carefully and stared at it for several seconds before speaking. "The first secret is not that Claire existed," she said. "The first secret is why she spent years watching this family from the edges instead of sitting among us." Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. My mother took a deep breath and looked directly at me. The concern I had noticed earlier returned to her eyes. It was stronger now, almost protective. Then she spoke the words that instantly changed the atmosphere in the room. "Because Claire Morgan was waiting for the right moment to tell someone in this family the truth about where they really came from." For a few seconds after my mother's revelation, nobody seemed capable of speaking. The room remained frozen in stunned silence. I could hear the ticking of the old clock above the fireplace and the distant rustling of leaves outside the living room windows. My mind raced through every possible explanation, yet none of them made sense. "What do you mean, where they really came from?" Michael finally asked. His voice sounded sharper than before. My mother carefully folded the paper in her hands and placed it back inside the envelope. Then she looked around the room, making eye contact with each person before answering. "I mean exactly what I said." Caroline shook her head in disbelief. "Mom, are you saying someone in this family does not know who they really are?" My mother nodded slowly. The reaction was immediate. Questions erupted from every corner of the room. Some relatives spoke over one another. Others exchanged confused glances. Through it all, my mother remained remarkably calm. Eventually, she raised her hand, and the room quieted again. "The first secret is not about shame," she said. "It is about a promise." She walked back to the wooden table and opened another folder. Inside were several documents, including what appeared to be legal records and hospital forms. The dates on the papers stretched back more than 2 decades. My stomach tightened. Whatever was happening had clearly been hidden for a very long time. My mother selected one document and handed it to me. I glanced down and immediately recognized that it was a birth record. The name printed near the top made my breath catch. Claire Morgan. The room seemed to tilt slightly around me. I looked back up at my mother. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked quietly. Instead of answering directly, she handed me a second document. This one was older and partially faded. My eyes moved across the page until they stopped on a handwritten note attached near the bottom. The note had been signed by Claire herself. I read the final sentence twice before its meaning settled in. "If anything ever happens to me, please make sure she knows the truth." My hands began trembling. "She?" I whispered. My mother nodded. The concern in her eyes returned immediately. Around me, family members watched the exchange with growing anxiety. Michael leaned forward. Caroline looked completely bewildered. Nobody understood where this was going. My mother took a deep breath. 23 years ago, Claire came to me during the most difficult period of her life. She was frightened. She was alone. And she was carrying a burden she did not know how to share. The room listened in complete silence. "We became friends," my mother continued. "Over time, she trusted me with something incredibly important." She paused. Her eyes drifted briefly toward the empty chair. Something she wanted revealed only when the time was right. My heart pounded harder with every sentence. Then my mother opened a small wooden box hidden beneath the stack of documents. Inside rested a silver locket. The metal had aged over the years, but remained beautiful. My mother carefully lifted it from the box and opened it. Inside were 2 tiny photographs. One showed Claire. The other showed a little girl around 4 years old. The moment I saw the child, a strange feeling washed over me. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The shape of the eyes, the smile, the expression. It looked familiar, too familiar. My mother looked directly at me. "The second secret begins with that photograph," she said softly. My chest tightened. Around me, relatives exchanged increasingly nervous glances. Nobody seemed certain what they were seeing, yet everyone sensed that something enormous was about to be revealed. Then my mother spoke the words that instantly transformed every assumption in the room. "Rachel, before this gathering ends, you are going to learn why Claire spent 20 years watching over your life from a distance without ever introducing herself." The words seemed to echo through the room long after my mother stopped speaking. Nobody reacted immediately. It was as though every person present needed a moment to absorb what they had just heard. I stared at the small photograph inside the silver locket. The little girl looked so familiar that it made my chest ache. I could not explain why. My mother slowly closed the locket and placed it on the table between us. "Rachel," she said gently, "there are parts of your life that even you do not know." My brother shifted uneasily in his chair. Caroline looked from me to our mother and back again. "Are you saying Claire knew Rachel?" she asked. "More than that," my mother replied. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. Every answer seemed to arrive one step behind a dozen new questions. My mother picked up another envelope from the box. Unlike the others, this one had my name written across the front in faded blue ink. "Rachel." Seeing my own name written there sent a chill through me. "Claire gave me this letter years ago," my mother explained. "She asked me not to open it unless the circumstances she feared actually happened." She paused before continuing. "A few months ago, I realized those circumstances had finally arrived." I could barely breathe as she handed me the envelope. The paper felt delicate beneath my fingers. The handwriting was unfamiliar, yet somehow deeply personal. Around me, the entire room watched in silence. I carefully unfolded the letter and began reading. The first few lines immediately caught me off guard. Claire addressed me directly. She wrote, as though she had known me all my life. She spoke about watching me grow up. She mentioned school events, family celebrations, milestones I barely remembered myself. Several details were so specific that tears began forming in my eyes before I reached the middle of the page. Claire described attending my high school graduation from the back row of the auditorium. She described seeing me leave for college. She even remembered a summer fair where I had won a blue ribbon in a local art competition when I was 13 years old. My hands trembled. How could she know all of this? I whispered. My mother looked down. "Because she never stopped caring about you." The room remained completely silent. I continued reading. Then I reached a paragraph that changed everything. Claire wrote that there had never been a day when she forgot about me. Not one birthday. Not one Christmas. Not one important moment. She wrote that circumstances beyond her control had forced her to make a decision many years earlier. A decision she regretted every day afterward. I stopped reading and looked up at my mother. The expression on her face told me she already knew what came next. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Slowly, I lowered my eyes back to the page. The next sentence felt impossible. Claire wrote that she had spent more than 20 years waiting for the opportunity to tell me one simple truth. She was not merely a family friend. She was not a distant acquaintance. She was not an observer standing quietly at the edge of family photographs. According to the letter, Claire Morgan was my biological mother. Gasps spread across the room. Someone dropped a coffee cup onto the carpet. Caroline covered her mouth with both hands. Michael stared at me in complete disbelief. As for me, I could only sit there frozen, staring at the words on the page. Every memory I possessed suddenly felt uncertain. Every assumption about my past seemed to crack beneath the weight of a truth I never imagined possible. Then my mother spoke softly into the silence. "That is the second secret. But before you decide what it means, there is still one more truth you have not heard." Nobody spoke. After my mother's last sentence, the silence felt almost unreal. I sat motionless with Claire's letter still trembling in my hands. Across the room, relatives stared at me with expressions ranging from disbelief to concern. My entire understanding of my life had shifted within a matter of minutes. Yet according to my mother, the biggest revelation had not even arrived. I looked up slowly. "There is more." My voice barely sounded like my own. My mother nodded. Her eyes were filled with compassion. "Much more." She walked toward the empty chair and gently rested her hand against its wooden back. For the first time all afternoon, I noticed a small engraved plaque attached beneath the seat. The words were difficult to read from where I sat. My mother turned the chair slightly so everyone could see it. The engraving contained a single name, Claire Morgan. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. This chair was always meant for her, my mother explained. When I planned this gathering, I wanted everyone to understand that she belonged here. My heart tightened. For years, Claire had remained on the edges of photographs, on the edges of family events, on the edges of my life. Now her absence somehow felt larger than her presence ever could have. My mother opened another folder and removed a thick stack of documents. Some appeared to be legal records. Others were letters and personal notes. She handed the first page directly to me. Read the highlighted section. I lowered my eyes to the paper. It was a court document dated more than 20 years earlier. Several paragraphs had been marked. As I read, confusion quickly replaced shock. The document described a temporary guardianship agreement. My mother had not adopted me. She had not taken me away from Claire. Instead, Claire herself had requested the arrangement. According to the records, she had been diagnosed with a severe medical condition shortly after my birth. Doctors were uncertain whether she would survive the following year. Facing overwhelming uncertainty, she made a heartbreaking decision. She asked her closest friend, Eleanor Bennett, to raise me if anything happened. Tears filled my eyes. The room remained completely silent as my mother continued. The doctors believed Claire had very little time, she said softly. She wanted to protect you from instability and fear. My chest ached as I listened. Everything sounded tragic, but understandable. Then my mother revealed the next piece of the story. What nobody expected was that Claire recovered. Several relatives gasped quietly. I stared at her. Recovered? My mother nodded. Completely. Suddenly, dozens of questions exploded in my mind. If Claire survived, why did she never come back? Why remain hidden for 20 years? Why watch from a distance instead of stepping into my life? My mother seemed to anticipate the question. She opened the final envelope. Inside rested a letter addressed to both of us. Eleanor and Rachel. The handwriting belonged to Claire. My mother carefully unfolded the pages. This letter contains the third secret, she said. Every person in the room leaned forward. Even the air seemed still. My mother began reading. Claire described her recovery. She described returning to a normal life. But she also described watching me grow surrounded by love, stability, and opportunity. Every year she planned to reveal herself. Every year she postponed the decision. She feared disrupting the life I already had. She feared creating confusion. Most of all, she feared turning my childhood into a struggle between two mothers who both loved me deeply. Tears rolled down my cheeks as my mother continued reading. Then she reached the final paragraph. Her voice trembled slightly for the first time all day. Rachel, she read, the greatest truth is not that Eleanor raised you when I could not. The greatest truth is that she and I made every important decision together. We were never rivals. We were family. The room fell silent once more. Yet somehow I knew the story was still not complete. Because beneath the shock and emotion, one question remained unanswered. Why had my mother waited until now to reveal any of this at all? The question lingered in the room after my mother finished reading Claire's letter. Nobody spoke immediately. Even the relatives who had spent the entire afternoon asking questions now sat quietly, absorbing everything they had heard. I stared at the papers spread across the table. The photographs, the legal documents, the letters, the silver locket. Piece by piece, an entirely different version of my life had emerged before my eyes. Yet one mystery remained. Why now? Why had my mother waited more than 2 decades to reveal any of this? Slowly, I looked toward her. You said there was a reason for this meeting. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. What changed? My mother nodded as though she had been expecting the question all along. She returned to her chair and sat down for the first time that afternoon. Suddenly, she looked older. Not weaker, just tired. The kind of tiredness that comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time. A month ago, she began, I received something from Claire's attorney. Several relatives exchanged surprised glances. My attention sharpened immediately. My mother reached into the final box resting on the table and removed a large envelope. Unlike the others, this one appeared relatively new. The seal had already been broken. Claire passed away 6 weeks ago, she said softly. The announcement struck me harder than I expected. I had never truly known Claire. Until today, I had not even known she existed. Yet the thought that she was gone filled me with a sadness that was difficult to explain. The room remained silent as my mother continued. Before she died, she left instructions. She wanted all of you gathered together. She wanted the truth revealed. And she wanted one final message delivered. My heart tightened. My mother carefully unfolded another letter. This one had been written shortly before Claire's death. Unlike the earlier letters, the handwriting appeared slightly less steady. But the words remained clear. My mother began reading aloud. Claire wrote about time. About how quickly years can disappear. She described watching me grow from a distance and struggling with her decision almost every day. She admitted there were moments when she nearly stepped forward. High school graduation, college commencement, my wedding day. Yet every time, she convinced herself that disrupting my life would serve her needs rather than mine. Tears glistened in my mother's eyes as she continued reading. Then Claire addressed the entire family. She thanked them for unknowingly giving me a childhood filled with stability and love. She thanked my mother for keeping a promise that lasted more than 20 years. Most importantly, she explained why the secrets had remained hidden. It was never about deception. It was about protection. The room listened in complete silence. Then came the part that surprised everyone. Claire revealed that she had been quietly supporting the family for years. Not emotionally, financially, through anonymous donations, through educational funds, through assistance provided during difficult times. Several relatives looked stunned as specific examples were mentioned. A scholarship that helped a cousin attend college. Emergency support during a medical crisis. Assistance when an aunt nearly lost her home. Nobody had ever known where the help came from. According to the letter, Claire had arranged everything anonymously because she never wanted recognition. My mother folded the letter and looked around the room. That was her final gift, she said quietly. Suddenly, the entire day took on a different meaning. Claire had not spent 20 years standing outside the family. In her own way, she had been helping hold it together. Then my mother opened a small folder attached to the back of the envelope. Inside was a single photograph taken only a few months earlier. Claire stood beside a lake smiling warmly at the camera. On the back she had written one sentence. My mother read it aloud. Families are not built by blood alone. They are built by the people who choose to love one another. Nobody spoke after that. But as I looked around the room, I sensed something beginning to change. For the first time all afternoon, people seemed less focused on the secrets themselves and more focused on what those secrets were trying to teach us. And somehow, I knew the final revelation was still waiting. The atmosphere inside the living room had changed completely. When the family gathering began, people arrived carrying curiosity and uncertainty. Now they sat, surrounded by letters, photographs, memories, and truths that had remained hidden for decades. The secrets no longer felt like separate revelations. Slowly, they were beginning to form a single story. My mother remained seated near the fireplace, her hands resting gently on the final envelope. The afternoon sunlight had faded outside, leaving the room bathed in the warm glow of lamps that had been switched on during the long hours of conversation. Nobody seemed eager to leave. Nobody wanted to miss whatever came next. I looked toward my mother. You said there were 3 secrets, I reminded her softly. We know about Claire. We know who she was. We know why she stayed away. What is the 3rd secret? Around the room, several heads nodded. Everyone wanted the same answer. My mother took a slow breath before speaking. The 3rd secret is not about Claire alone. It is about all of us. Confusion spread immediately across the room. Michael frowned. Caroline exchanged a glance with our Aunt Linda. My mother opened the final folder attached to Claire's estate documents. Inside was a collection of records that looked surprisingly ordinary. Family photographs, financial statements, school records, holiday cards. At first, nothing appeared unusual. Then my mother spread them across the table. Look at the dates, she said. We did. Gradually a pattern emerged. Every major moment in our family's history appeared represented in those documents. Graduations, weddings, births, illnesses, recoveries, new jobs, retirements, milestones large and small. Claire had somehow documented them all. She kept track of everything, Michael said quietly. Why? My mother smiled sadly. Because she never stopped considering herself part of this family. The room fell silent again. Then my mother revealed the final letter Claire had left behind. Unlike the others, it was addressed not to me, but to everyone gathered in the room. She began reading. Claire wrote that for many years she believed blood was the most important thing connecting people. Losing the opportunity to raise her daughter had convinced her she had lost her family forever. But over time, she discovered something unexpected. She discovered that family could grow beyond biology. It could expand through loyalty, kindness, sacrifice, and love. The words felt simple, yet powerful. Then the letter reached its most surprising section. Claire explained that she had intentionally arranged this gathering not to reveal my identity, not to reveal her own. Those truths were only part of the story. Her real purpose was to reveal something about the Bennett family itself. She wanted everyone to understand that nearly every major act of generosity within the family had happened because someone chose compassion over obligation. Not because they shared the same blood. Not because they expected something in return. Because they cared. The room listened quietly as my mother continued reading. Then Claire revealed the final secret. The scholarship she funded. The medical assistance she provided. The financial support she offered. None of it came from her personal wealth alone. Over the years, several members of the family had unknowingly contributed as well. Small donations, volunteer work, acts of support, quiet kindnesses that had rippled outward and helped people they never even met. Claire had spent years tracking those moments. According to her, the Bennett family had become connected by something far stronger than genetics. They had become connected by choice. Tears filled several eyes around the room, mine included. Suddenly, the three secrets fit together perfectly. Claire's hidden presence, my true origin, the deeper truth about what made a family. They were not separate stories at all. They were different chapters of the same lesson. My mother folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the others. Then she looked around the room one final time. Claire wanted you all to understand this before the meeting ended, she said softly. But there is still one final request she made. And what happens next depends entirely on the choice Rachel decides to make. For several moments after my mother finished speaking, nobody said a word. The room felt suspended in time. Outside, evening had settled over the neighborhood, and the last traces of daylight had disappeared beyond the windows. I looked around at the faces surrounding me. My brother, my sister, my relatives, the woman I had called Mom my entire life. And beside the fireplace, the empty chair that had silently waited through every revelation. The final request. Claire's final request. My mother reached into the envelope and removed one last folded page. She left this for you, she said softly. My hands trembled as I accepted it. The paper felt impossibly light considering the weight it carried. I unfolded the page and began reading. Claire's final message was surprisingly simple. There were no dramatic revelations, no hidden fortunes, no shocking confessions. Instead, she wrote about gratitude. She thanked me for living a happy life, even though she had watched it from a distance. She thanked Eleanor for keeping her promise when it mattered most. Then she explained her final wish. She wanted the empty chair to remain at every future Bennett family gathering, not as a symbol of loss, as a symbol of choice. According to Claire, every family eventually faces moments that test loyalty, forgiveness, and understanding. The chair would serve as a reminder that there is always room for one more person at the table. One more conversation, one more act of kindness, one more chance to choose love over resentment. Tears blurred my vision as I reached the final paragraph. Claire wrote that she never wanted to be remembered as a secret. She wanted to be remembered as proof that family can take many forms. The room remained completely silent as I lowered the letter. Then something unexpected happened. Michael stood up first. Without saying a word, he walked across the room and placed a hand on my shoulder. A moment later, Caroline joined him. Then my aunt. Then several cousins. One by one, people crossed the room. There were no speeches. No dramatic declarations. Just quiet understanding. The kind that arrives when people finally see the full picture. My mother watched the scene with tears in her eyes. For the first time all day, she seemed relieved. The burden she had carried for more than 20 years had finally been set down. After a while, she stood and walked toward the empty chair. Gently, she moved it from the center of the room and positioned it beside the family circle. The gesture was simple, yet everyone understood its meaning. Claire was no longer standing outside the family, neither in photographs nor in memory. She finally had a place among us. Months later, life slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. Family gatherings continued. Holidays came and went. The empty chair remained. Sometimes new guests asked about it. Sometimes children were curious. Each time, someone would tell the story. Not the story of secrets. Not the story of hidden documents. The story of two women who made an impossible decision out of love. The story of a family that discovered truth does not always divide people. Sometimes it brings them closer together. As for me, I no longer felt torn between two identities. I was Rachel Bennett. I was Claire's daughter. I was Eleanor's daughter. Both things were true. Both things could exist at the same time. Looking back now, I understand that the greatest surprise was never discovering where I came from. It was discovering how many people had quietly loved me along the way. The meeting that began with questions ended with answers none of us expected. 3 secrets had finally been revealed. Yet the most important truth was far simpler than any of them. Family is not defined by a single moment, a single name, or even a single bloodline. Family is built by the people who choose each day to care for one another. And in the end, that was the legacy Claire wanted all of us to remember.